As we come to the end of Movember, we wanted to touch on men's health in today's Insta Live. So I'm going to be joined by Dr. Sunni Patel. He has over 15 years experience within healthcare and gut support. He is a gut influencer and runs a practice over at Dish Dash Deets, and really looking forward to unpacking some of the common gut issues that we're seeing in men, or just general health issues that we're seeing in men. And this is not to say that women's health isn't important. You know that we do focus on that a lot at Field Doctor, and it's something I'm truly passionate about. But it's really important to not neglect what's going on with men's health. And I think specifically on the back of what's happened this month and covering sort of the theme around Movember, and really looking forward to unpacking this topic a little bit more. If you've got any specific questions that you would love us to cover, please feel free to send them through, and I'm just going to let Sunni, and then he can give us a little bit more of an intro of his experience and his background, because no better than from the person himself. Hi Sunni, how are you?
Good afternoon. Very well, thank you, Sasha. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good. It's a wonderfully foggy, misty end of November day. How's it with you?
Yeah, just as not as foggy, but quite apt, I guess, if we're talking about uncovering the myths of men's health, that you should be amongst this whole fog and mist. So yeah, no, it's wonderful to make the time to talk to you and with the Field Doctor team. So it's a very important topic to talk about as well.
Likewise, I'm really looking to, unpack it a little bit further. I think it feels like the pendulum has swung so much now about everybody talking about women's health, which obviously I'm overjoyed by, because I feel like that has been neglected. But I think then it just sort of feels, we're sort of also neglecting what's going on with men's health. And I think, on the back of Movember, there are some pertinent health issues that guys are that are more prevalent with men, and maybe don't get as often discussed, because maybe men aren't as great as at talking about it. But let's unpack it. Let's start with if you wouldn't mind just giving a quick intro to yourself and your experience.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Dr. Sunni Patel. I'm currently a health food consultant and coach, which covers all aspects of lifestyle medicine. I started off my career in healthcare around ophthalmology. I have a PhD in risk factors for diabetes and health disease, and I'm still kind of an active clinician, scientist, and kind of peer-reviewed publisher. And I basically just do everything to do with health. So that's me in a nutshell. I have my own kind of clinical practice that covers helping people that are kind of going through a gamut of issues, from burnout, fatigue, gut health issues, as well as kind of menopause. Although we're talking about men's health, I think, like you said, Sasha, it's so important to talk about so many taboo conditions and how it is underserved and underutilized. So yes, that's me in a very quick nutshell.
Oh, perfect intro. So given your background and your PhD in risk factors, so that's a really good intro, but are there any specific conditions that men are more likely to suffer from? Over to you.
Yeah, so I think, putting aside obviously kind of physiological, anatomical differences, obviously testicular cancer, that we're kind of obviously more prone in men versus women, we definitely know that there's probably top 10 health conditions or diseases that are more prevalent in men. So starting off with the common ones like diabetes, heart disease, stroke, but we also have started noticing that actually the prevalence of the number of men reporting kind of health conditions from respiratory diseases, so like COPD, asthma, emphysema, are increasing. Alcohol misuse and actually conditions with the liver from alcohol and liver disease, depression and suicide, but also accidental injuries. And when I mean accidental injuries, I mean more so kind of brain injuries from particular kind of male dominant kind of activities. But we're also noticing a rise in flu, pneumonia, and sexually transmitted diseases as well. So you can see it's quite a broad spectrum. And sometimes when we are, for instance, in the month of November, we consider or focus on things like cancer, but we forget actually there's a range of non-communicable and communicable diseases that we should be considering with kind of men overall, and it's definitely growing.
And why are they more susceptible to some of those conditions? Is it lifestyle? Is it jobs? I suppose you sort of touched on male-dominated sports or certain sports. I'd imagine sort of, you know, within rugby, football, I saw sort of a story very much around headbutting and, you know, in football and that. So, yeah, it'd be great to know a little bit more of the context.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Outside of obviously male-dominated lifestyle factors, I mean, some of my research has also found that we know that men are predisposed genetically or also from a lifestyle factor where, for instance, if we look at insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome, more men kind of report or will have reported metabolic syndrome. So that's, you know, weight gain, insulin resistance, blood pressure, and other risk factors or cardiometabolic risk factors, which we see are probably due to a link of lifestyle and genetics as well. We do also tend to know, when you deep dive into lifestyle, interventionally, women are more open to kind of having earlier preventative interventions than men. Men tend to leave this a lot later, as soon as they start noticing kind of more issues or symptoms that they can no longer ignore. So I think it's a multitude or multifactorial. It's not just, you know, a male will be predisposed just genetically. I think there are some other things to unpick from a psychosocial, psychosomatic, psychological, behavioral, and other elements of, you know, for instance, what we define as masculinity these days as well, and particular generations. We also know other things are on the rise. You know, we talk about eating disorders or other health considerations with men. We also know one thing that you and I want to talk about is orthorexia is definitely more prevalent. Anecdotally, I'm seeing that more in my clinic than I ever have done before, even from my research.
Would you mind just defining what orthorexia is for those that haven't come across it?
Yeah, so orthorexia isn't like other eating disorders which have been defined as a clinical or medical definition. So, you know, anorexia nervosa or bulimia. It's thought that actually orthorexia is more linked with OCD tendencies, where a particular individuals will focus more so on a healthy lifestyle, but to a compulsive level. So they, you know, earlier signs and where it will become more prevalent are things like calorie counting, cleaner living, looking at particular protein sources, and becoming very much focused and centering their living and their lifestyle around those aspects where it does become compulsive and disorder in nature. Where it becomes also quite harmful is when they start comparing to others and fad diets and start noticing differences in others and not in themselves, where it then does create disordered eating patterns and behaviors, but also then psychosocial, psychological thinking behaviors or pattern of behaviors where it starts affecting their esteem and also kind of that saboteur mentality as well.
And so that seems like it's on a rise with men. What about gut issues? Are you seeing any sort of difference between women and men in terms of some of the gut issues that you're seeing in your clinic?
Interestingly, I would always have more women coming to me with IBS related problems where they've been to a doctor, they've been through the system, they've had a colonoscopy, a sigmoidoscopy, everything's come back clinically kind of negative, and they basically have said, and as you know, Sasha, usually what most physicians will do is they'll diagnose it as IBS because it's a functional disorder. Off you go, do something about it. And so I always used to get a lot more females coming to my practice. Now I've slowly started noticing men noticing gut-related issues. So it may not be IBS as the full gamut or spectrum of symptoms. It may start off with heartburn, such as GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease, where they've just had recurrent heartburn or gastric pain, which to the point has led them to kind of impact their quality of life. Slowly started noticing gastroenteritis or gastritis kind of becoming more prevalent, as well as chronic diarrhea and constipation. One thing that a lot of people don't usually like talking about, but hemorrhoids and piles definitely increasing amongst men. And we generally know with Valsalva movements and things anyway, it can be more prevalent with men. So we're definitely seeing those type of gut health or gut issues kind of coming through from the male patient a lot more nowadays.
And you sort of touched on it, but I guess because maybe the stigma about talking about these conditions has been lessened, you're seeing this difference in terms of health-seeking behavior, and that people are now coming to it at an earlier stage in their disease process, or maybe men feel more able to talk about it and less embarrassed, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, frankly speaking, no. I would love for it to be that we as the male population are where women are in terms of being more intuitive and in tune with their bodies, and noticing that even earlier signs where it's disrupted sleep or energy or fatigue should actually warrant some sort of kind of seeking help. Men, I'm still noticing, have this bravado maybe, where they feel that they need to weather the storm. I think that common adage in Britain where we say it's just under the weather, I think it's still stuck with the male population. But when we look at kind of a lot of psychological studies, and I was reading up on this, and I think it's quite interesting when we unpick it, we know it's not just the masculinity or the bravado of men seeking help. Some of the factors, and I think this is where we need to separate it as well. We also know that men live a little bit shorter than women, so that may also impact. But also the fact that different diagnoses, or we know that the earlier question that we spoke about with men having more serious conditions, that may lead to why they're not coming earlier in the system, because they have a serious diagnosis and they have a shorter lifespan. But we're also noticing now that men, and if you look at internal family system way of working in psychotherapy, men tend to kind of look at kind of their family systems more. So they actually will probably deprioritize their health over others. And that's why there's this focus on masculinity as one of the primary care reasons, and there's an underuse or avoidance. And also kind of, if you look at prehistoric, and I'm prehistoric when I mean 20 years ago, 20 years, kind of the notion of healthcare, there was very much a feminine metaphor around healthcare. So I think that still has actually still transferred to certain generations and cultures and religion with men. Medication or going to the healthcare system is seen as more female and passive, whereas men feel that you need to be more resilient and independent. So there's definitely that, but I am noticing a change, and I think maybe the pandemic has helped that, where men have been able to actually be closer to their family systems now, and they've had to start listening to their body a bit more, and now they feel that if they can have a safe space where it's curated, they can start talking about some of the issues that are going on. So types of change are going and happening, but maybe slower than I would potentially like it to be, but we're definitely seeing some changes.
Wow, that's so fascinating. What about nutrition? When it comes to sort of nutrition, macronutrients, do men, look for different things when they're looking at a label, when they're looking for, some nutritious food?
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the one thing I should caveat in all of this, and I'm sure both of us want to say this, that we don't want to tar every male with the same brush. Everyone's different, of course, but we generally do find that even with the science out there and even market research and anecdotally amongst physicians and clinicians, especially in the well-being space, men are still very much focused on macro counting. So when they look at their understanding of nutrition, it's very much based on calories first, and then it would be carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And actually, it's not even in that order. So I should change that. It's always protein first, fats, then carbohydrate. And that's been very much led by the movements in particular fad diets, looking at paleo diets or the carnivore diet, then looking at kind of keto or Atkins diet, and then looking at low carb diets. So it's very much focused on that. And I always find there's a reticence or a barrier when you start talking about micronutrients or more sustainable management of kind of well-being with men. So it's still very much focused on those three dimensions, and then definitely calorie counting. And I think that links very closely with the orthorexia element with men, and we're seeing that. I mean, there's data that I saw recently that in a life 10% of men in their lifetime are going to have some sort of disordered eating behavior, and I think that would actually kind of cover orthorexia. Although yes, it's not defined scientifically, I would still think orthorexia is disordered eating and disordered patterns of behavior of some sort. So I still think yes, 100% around that. And then really I find that men will compare a lot more than women generally, and this is anecdotally. They will always say, oh, I met some friends and one friend was doing this diet and I felt, you know, it worked for them, so why is it not working for me? Whereas I think females generally tend to understand the scientific notion of the word diet. You know, what is it that we should be habitually kind of doing, as opposed to what the mainstream media has now coined as diet. So yes, that's what I'm tending to find, and also trying to change the notion of concept of protein and sources of protein.
It's interesting just on the eating disorder point. I think obviously eating disorders, unfortunately, in teens is also on the rise. You know, particularly after COVID, and it has also been in the rise very much in boys. So, you know, I think people always associate eating disorders very much with girls, and them wanting to be skinny. And I think it's great to sort of mention that it isn't just so the case. I'd love to talk a little bit more about protein that you've touched on,
Yeah.
because I think protein and meat is generally sort of so associated with muscle and muscle strength. And, you know, for a lot of the guys that I know that have gone to gyms, you know, it's such an important nutrient for them because they associated it with bulking up. And I know that, you know, Game Changers is a movie, for those who haven't seen it, very much was sort of pushing a vegan diet or a more plant-based way of eating, and was really developed around a couple of guys, very much to show that it didn't affect sporting performance by them eating a more plant-based diet. Are you seeing this sort of, I don't know, stronghold around the importance of meat and meat proteins sort of as a center on the plate, for the guys that you're seeing?
Yeah, and I'm seeing it generally across the board, because I think we need to think about the social history of food. If we look at British and European style of eating, it's always been meat and two veg. So we always have all thought about protein as being the cornerstone of well-being or sustenance. And even if we think about historically, meat was for the wealthy and it felt like luxury. And that's obviously now transferred to kind of modern day in a different form. So now we look at as protein, as you say, as this masculine form of our prehistoric days as well. What did cavemen do? They hunted for meat, or so we thought, because if we look at a lot of other analogues to cavemen lifestyles, if we look at the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, they're the last kind of hunter-gatherers of our generation. But actually their diet isn't predominantly meat, it's tubers, it's fiber. And fiber is such a under kind of utilized word amongst the male population. Fiber just does not seem to be important. But unfortunately, protein seems to be this mainstay, because men have been told that in order to bulk and in order to have kind of that lean muscle and to have endurance and stamina, protein is going to be your holy grail. And so for me, I always have to do a lot of kind of eating addictive behavior work and actually unpick what are you looking from your prehistoric brain versus your prefrontal cortex and your actual conscious brain, saying you need carbohydrates for energy, you need protein for the essential amino acids, and you need your healthy fats, and you need an overall composition. But it tires me in a positive way, where I always have to talk to my male clients about their understanding of protein and sources of protein. Now, I will caveat this: I'm plant-based, but all my clients are omnivores. I do not have this agenda where I like to encourage and change people to become kind of more, to go solely on a plant-based diet. We should all have that human free will to kind of make those informed decisions. But there are things that we know. All proteins aren't equal from plant-based or animal. We know that, for instance, it is sometimes easier to absorb particular amino acids from an animal-based protein. But we do know that actually plant-based proteins add far more nutritional benefits, fiber, as I've said, and other antioxidants and polyphenols, which you aren't able to get from eating solely animal-based proteins. But we also should be aware that absorption and bioavailability varies as well. So there was a recent study that actually showed that in the first 2 hours, you can have 33% more bioavailability of amino acids from animal-based products versus plant-based, but in 4 hours, it's only 2%. So actually, if we look at that over a spectrum of time, you're not going to get, from the law of averages, a higher rate of bioavailability. So I would always say, look at your body and your needs. The other misconception is protein loading. And as we all know, the body can only process a certain amount of protein at one sitting as well. And we should look at that person's activity and the protein needs. And the final thing I should say as well is when we look at it from the gut health perspective as well, if people do have gut health issues, even with IBS, for instance, we know that can compromise and cause malabsorption. And that can be because of diarrhea, a leaky gut, kind of increased intestinal kind of hyperpermeability, things like that. As much as you can throw protein as that plaster almost, it's not going to help your body. It's actually understanding that full composition. So yes, that was a long verbal diatribe on protein, but it's so important. I don't know how much I can hammer it at home, but I think it's a slow journey.
Yeah, and I think this understanding that actually most of us are getting more than enough protein in our diets, that we actually don't need to have any more than we are having. Although it is an important ingredient or macronutrient in our diets, in terms of satiation, and we do need those amino acids. But thank you. I think that was an important myth to bust. What other myths would you like to sort of touch on that you sort of think are come up often?
So I think one thing that you touched upon already is about protein and sources. So I tend to find a lot of people feel that there's this argument of like protein shakes and then extending that further, soy. That argument of soy is always going to be there. And then looking at the types of proteins you get in protein shakes. So, whey protein or pea protein or rice protein. And I will always again say, look at if you can get a complete source of protein. A lot of people forget that we only need 9 amino acids. The others the body can make. And actually, soy and other ingredients like buckwheat, quinoa provide you that complete source of protein that you need. And it's not going to increase the risk of cancers. There's been a lot of longitudinal studies that have shown now the positive benefit of eating minimally processed soy. And it doesn't always have to be tofu. And actually, we see that actually does align with some of the blue zone diets as well. So tofu and soy is a great thing, not just for women. A lot of my male clients will say, yes, yeah, but it's great for women because I've heard it's great to navigate the menopause. But I'll say, actually, well, it's actually also very good for men and hormonal fluctuations as well, but also providing a cleaner source of protein. So that's one thing, the source of protein and type of protein in soy. Whey protein and casein doesn't, I think, have any kind of supremacy over other types of protein as well. I think listen to your body. Yes, when we look at bioavailability, sometimes whey protein may absorb quicker than rice protein or pea protein. But again, listen to your body in terms of lactose intolerance, etc. Calories.
And some people do get symptoms, I know, sort of anecdotally, from whey protein. So yeah, everybody's different makeups.
We've spoken about calories and calorie counting, and I think there is this whole misconception and myth around calories and what it truly means. We know from a food science perspective, the calorie count isn't the true impact that it has on your body for so many reasons. But the last one I want to talk about, which I think you may also be seeing in your practice, and I know a lot of people are seeing it, is food sensitivities. If I got £1 for every time a client said, I've done a test and I can't eat X, Y, and Z, and I have red group and a green group and a yellow group, I'd be a multi-billionaire right now. Because I think when you
Someone is. Definitely is.
and this is the thing, right? It's because people always are looking for a quick fix and an answer. So many times I get male clients, and it's always male clients that say, will you be doing a test just to let me know what I can eat and can't eat? And sometimes I feel like, well, no, there's a thing called intuition. Unless you have a clinically presented sign and diagnosis of an allergy, and I think we convolute allergy and sensitivities now. And sometimes people forget, actually, gut dysbiosis, when you have your imbalance of bacteria, can present itself as symptoms of sensitivity. And if you focus on your gut first, you may be able to eat a lot of foods that otherwise this very expensive test has told you to eliminate. And I just don't like eliminated or restrictive diets when it's not grounded by science. And you've probably seen these tests, Sasha, they contradict themselves so many times. Some people can eat oats, but then they can't eat quinoa and things like that. I'm thinking, what, if you unpick it, it doesn't make sense. So I really would say, find the right clinician to work with and really look at intuitively your symptoms.
Definitely. Please don't go do IgG tests. They go by various different names, but they are not recognized by the BSACI. They're deemed to be unreliable tests, and they're a lot of money. In fact, work with, as you say, a properly trained clinician, and rather spend that money with a clinician and their time and getting to the bottom of it. A lot of these intolerances, you can only get to the bottom by unpacking symptoms, food and symptom diaries, and there might be some eliminations that you may want to do along the way, but always do it with a properly trained healthcare professional, because, as you say, we don't want people to go on elimination diets. You can be removing all these fantastic foods that we need for nutrition, fiber, gut support, and then you've removed them out of your diet. It can sometimes be very scary to bring them back in, and people then end up having very, very limited diets. So absolutely, here. Steer clear of tests.
Tests as well. Again, people always think, well, if you've gut health, why are you not offering stool sample testing? And it's just not validated. Again, the science isn't.
It's still early days, super early days on it. Might give you some information, like some facts, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what to do about it. So yeah, agreed. So gosh, I can't believe the time already. Let's round up with your top tips for gut health, because I'd love to hear those. And what do you sort of find works quite well with your patient population?
My 3 tips that I always tell my clients the world. Think of fiber and plant points first and foremost. So 30 grams of fiber a day or 30 unique plant points a week. That covers fruits, vegetables, nuts, pulses, legumes, nut milk, herbs and spices. So you can get an array from Mother Nature. Second, think brightly coloured fruits and vegetables. So you want to pack your diet with polyphenols and antioxidants, which is great also for winter and flu season right now, but just generally for longevity. And finally, where you can, add fermented foods. Okay, so a lot of people assume fermented foods are for those that can afford it, but there's an array of fermented foods. It doesn't always have to be raw kimchi or sauerkraut. Think of miso, some cheeses, some dairy, things like that. If you're not following a plant-based diet, look at fermented foods and add, I always say, a teaspoon a day. It sounds very Mary Poppins, but a spoonful a day will definitely help that gut health.
I love that tip. I absolutely love that tip. In Sweden, we have a lot of soured milk. It's called filmjölk, and a lot of people have it. So it's there's lots of different options out there for different budgets. And I think whilst the science really hasn't shown it yet around fermented foods, still more work to be done there. I think anecdotally, just looking at it, I'm a big advocate of it too.
Yeah.
So where can people go if they want to get some more reliable information? Have you got any top tips on that?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, I would say always look to trusted, qualified professionals first and foremost. I think there's this rise of influencers, and I would always question where their kind of integrity and their information comes from. You know, ask kind of your doctor as well. Look within the space that we have on Instagram and social media on validated kind of professionals. If you want to reach out to me personally, you can obviously find me on Instagram as Dr Sunni Patel. I have my own website, which is called dish-deets.com, and that has articles and recipes. So it's not just about pushing a particular agenda, it's about making information available, but it also has stories for people with their own gut health issues as well, just to kind of show you that you're not alone. And it's an award-winning blog now as well, I can finally say. So thank you. Yes. So, and you know, also through, like, you know, yourselves as well, Sasha, you know, qualified individuals and organizations, look towards the British Dietetic Association, ask people. I sometimes also think word of mouth is good. You know, someone has actually gone through, you know, that trial and test of a very good physician or a qualified professional, ask them for a recommendation, because your gut intuition is always going to serve you well, better than anything else.
Oh, wow. What a fantastic way to end this chat. Thank you so much, Sunny. I really enjoyed today's chat, and that was a lot of information to get through in half an hour. So thank you so much for sharing it all.
No, most well, and thank you for having me, Sasha. It's a pleasure to be part of the Field Doctor team and to be kind of just invited into the family to discuss about gut health and male health. So I know you're doing amazing things. So it's been a pleasure with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think it's lovely to meet other people that are passionate about the space of gut health. So together we move forward one gut at a time, and hoping to help people on a better health.
Power to the gut.
Power to the gut. Exactly. Oh, Sunny, lovely to chat to you. And thanks so much for everybody that joined us today. We're going to save it on the feed so that you can catch up if you joined late. And yeah, really looking forward to the next one that we do.
Take care. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Take care. Bye.